Today, you're going to hear true horror stories inspired by famous cursed objects. Real pieces that have survived through the centuries, leaving fear and destruction everywhere they've been. And it all begins with the Devil's Chapel mirror, said to reflect not the face of whoever looks into it, but the very hell hiding inside them. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any terrifying stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. When that mirror arrived at the workshop, I thought it was just another routine job. It was an old piece, salvaged from the rubble of a demolished chapel in Yorkshire, the kind of thing collectors eat up. Religious relic, sacred art, historical artifact. I'd heard it all before, but this time something was off. The delivery truck brought it wrapped in layers of thick cloth, like they were trying to keep it from seeing the road. And when I unwrapped it, the smell of damp wood and rust hit me like a punch to the gut. The frame was dark oak, carved with Gothic details. But what really caught my eye were the symbols scratched into the edges, like someone had tried to claw out old engravings. Nail marks, inverted crosses, broken circles, all deliberately defaced. This wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted to erase something. I spent a long time just staring, trying to make sense of the pattern. The longer I looked, the more uneasy I felt. The mirror seemed to stare back even through the dust. It wasn't until I started cleaning it, using the right brushes, the right solutions, that I noticed the reflection was wrong. The image was sharper than the room itself. I can't explain it. The colors were too vivid, like the light inside the glass had a life of its own. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then I realized the reflection lagged behind me by a second. I'd raise my arm, and the reflection hesitated. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I tested it over and over. Fast movements, slow ones, side to side. Same result. And every time it happened, I felt that creeping sensation of being watched, like something inside the mirror was reacting to me. Things got worse at night. I usually work late, and that night was no different. The workshop was nearly dark, just the bench lamp on. But when I turned off the lights to leave, the mirror still glowed. A faint, diffuse light, like the surface was holding on to brightness it shouldn't have. I stood there staring, and I swear I heard a muffled sound, like someone holding their breath. I thought it was the wind hitting the glass, but the windows were shut. I tried to ignore it, locked up the workshop and went home, but I couldn't sleep. I dreamed about the mirror, nonsense images, shadowy figures kneeling, a dark stone room. In the dream, I saw my reflection watching me, but the face wasn't quite mine. Something was off, like I was looking at a distorted version of myself. The next morning, I went back determined to finish the restoration. I'm not the type to spook easily, but that mirror unsettled me. I took measurements, cataloged the piece, and started digging into the so-called Devil's Chapel, the name scribbled on the origin records. I figured it was just local folklore, but the deeper I looked, the stranger the stories got. Turns out the chapel had been in some isolated village and was shut down in the 19th century. Locals said defrocked priests held some kind of inverted penance ritual there. Instead of confessing sins, people knelt before the mirror to face what they hid inside themselves. Not a symbol of faith, but a window into their personal hell. Legend had it that anyone who stared at their reflection too long got lost inside it. I laughed it off, of course. I'm a restorer, not a ghost hunter. But there was something about those stories that lined up too well with what I was feeling. I looked back at the mirror and noticed the glass, even clean, seemed to pulse slightly, like it was breathing. The reflected light moved in a subtle, almost organic way. By late afternoon, as I prepped the varnish, a chill ran down my spine. The air in the workshop grew heavy, and an eerie silence settled over the place. I looked at the mirror and saw figures, 3 shadowy shapes kneeling, hands clasped like they were praying. In the reflection, they were clearly there, right in front of the mirror. But when I looked over the top of the glass, the room was empty. No shadows. Nothing. I dropped the brush, stood there for a few seconds, trying to process it. And for some reason, I couldn't look away. The figures didn't move. They seemed frozen in endless prayer. But when I took a step back, one of them slowly lifted its head. I couldn't see a face, just darkness where the eyes should have been. I left the workshop right then, locked everything up, closed the blinds, and stood across the street trying to convince myself it was just an optical illusion. The brain plays tricks, especially when you're in a dimly lit space for too long. It was easier to believe that than to think something was actually in there. Still, that breathing sound came back that night. Faint, steady, like someone was breathing inside the glass. And I knew the mirror was locked up, covered with a sheet, yet I could hear it. The next day, I decided to take apart part of the frame to trace the origin of the scratches. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. Beneath the dark paint, there were even older carvings, nearly worn away, twisted human faces like silent screams. And at the top center of the frame, hidden under a wood splinter, was a symbol, a kind of upside-down triangle with an eye. A strange pressure built in my head, like someone was whispering right into my ear. The workshop was empty, just me and the mirror. And in that moment, the reflection gave me an expression that wasn't mine. It was my face, but the eyes, they were too wide, fixed, like I'd just seen something I could never unsee. That night, I covered the mirror with a thick sheet and tried to forget what I'd seen. I crashed on the workshop couch, exhausted, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw my reflection staring back with that wide, unblinking gaze. Sleep was impossible. In the dead of night, I heard a sharp sound, 3 soft knocks coming from the direction of the mirror. I froze, trying to convince myself it was the wind, but the noise repeated. This time it came with a muffled whisper, a rough, barely audible voice like it was coming from inside the fabric covering the mirror. I got up slowly, my heart pounding. Each step echoed in the silent workshop. When I touched the sheet, I felt it vibrate slightly, like something was breathing beneath it. I yanked the sheet off in one motion, and there I was, or what should have been me, staring back. But the reflection was smiling, a slow, unnatural smile that didn't match how I felt. The mouth moved before I could say anything, and the voice, muffled but clear, came from inside the glass. "Want to know who you really are?" I jerked back instinctively, stumbling over the chair behind me. The voice continued, even though the reflection's lips didn't move. "I can show you what you've hidden even from yourself." That sentence hit me like a physical blow. The sound of it vibrated inside my skull like it was echoing in my bones. I tried to answer, but the air wouldn't come. The surface of the mirror began to ripple, like something was pushing from inside. The frame creaked, and an unnatural cold filled the room. Suddenly, the reflection raised its hand, and I felt my own hand move, against my will. Before I knew it, my fingers were pressed against the glass. The touch was like plunging my hand into ice water, except there was resistance, something alive. Something grabbed my wrist and pulled. I screamed and tried to break free, but I couldn't. The reflection watched me calmly as my fingers seemed to sink into the glass like it was liquid. In that moment, images flashed before my eyes. Familiar faces, scenes I never wanted to remember. Mistakes, lies, cowardice I'd buried my whole life. It was like the mirror was forcing me to face everything I'd ever avoided. When I finally wrenched free, I collapsed to the floor, my arm numb and icy up to the shoulder. The glass stopped moving, but the reflection was still smiling. And for the first time, it wasn't mimicking me. It moved on its own. After that, things spiraled. Sometimes I'd turn my back and feel its gaze on me. Other times I'd see the sheet move on its own, like someone was running a hand underneath. The sound of soft knocking returned, rhythmic, insistent, especially in the dead of night. And even covered, the mirror kept glowing, casting shadows that didn't belong to anything in the room. I started losing track of the days. I barely ate, barely slept. I felt like there was another presence sharing the space with me, breathing the same air. Every time I passed the mirror, the temperature dropped, and I'd swear I heard my own voice calling my name from inside the glass. I tried to get rid of it. Called a collector who bought old sacred art and asked him to pick it up. But the next day, the truck that was supposed to come for the mirror never showed. The driver had an accident on the road, and the mirror was still there, in the same corner, untouched. After that, I gave up. I locked the room and avoided the workshop, but the knocking followed me. Sometimes it came from the bathroom, the window, even the bedroom mirror. The reflection started lagging more, and when it finally caught up, it smiled. That same smile. Now the sheet is torn and the glass is covered in marks from the inside out, like something tried to claw its way free. I don't go in there anymore, but I know it's still active. I still hear the low breathing, the sound of fingers tapping the glass. Sometimes people come by the workshop, curious about the stories going around town, and when they get close to that covered mirror, I watch from a distance. They look at the fabric, take a step back, and say they heard something inside. I don't say a word, because I know what's in there. That was horrifying. What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, what would you rate it? Some things are better left locked away forever. The next story is about an old Jewish wine box, infamous for trapping a restless spirit that refuses to move on. The dreaded Dybbuk Box. When the box arrived, the smell of old wood filled the shop before I even opened the package. It was strong, dry, like a forgotten attic mixed with something sickly sweet. The handwritten label only said, "Ancient Dybbuk Box, do not open." Of course, that made me laugh. I'd paid $130 for it in an online auction. The seller described it as a Jewish wine box, sealed with red wax, containing symbolic relics. He said it was used to trap a spirit, according to ancient traditions. Sounded like marketing hype, but it was exactly what I wanted. My shop specializes in oddities, objects that tell stories or pretend to. We've got everything: cracked 1940s dolls, stained photos with scratched out eyes, rusted crucifixes, broken wall clocks that haven't kept time in decades. People don't come here for beauty, they come for mystery. And that box promised it from the start. Just looking at it made you uneasy. It was small, made of dark wood, with faded Hebrew inscriptions carved into the lid. Melted wax sealed the clasp, and an old latch looked like it was glued shut with yellowed adhesive. Before putting it on display, I decided to look up this Dybbuk thing. I'd never heard of it. A quick Google search pulled up legends about restless spirits, entities that cling to the living. According to Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk is the soul of someone who died in suffering, trapped between worlds, able to latch onto objects, and then people. The box was supposedly a vessel to keep that spirit locked away. The more I read, the more ridiculous it seemed, but also the more intriguing, perfect for stirring up buzz among customers. I placed the box front and center on the main counter, well lit with a little sign, "Ritual object, do not touch." That was it. Within 2 days, the comments started. A regular who browses the curios said she got an eerie chill near the display. A couple mentioned feeling nauseous and dizzy after staring at it. One older gentleman asked me, dead serious, if I knew what it really was. I just laughed and said it was all part of the experience. The shop thrives on that kind of energy, memories, things that unsettle. But after a week, the unease became mine. The first strange night, I stayed late cataloging old photos. The shop was closed, lights dim, just me and the creaks of the old building. Suddenly I heard wood groaning, like the box lid was trying to shift. I clenched my jaw and kept working. 5 minutes later I heard whispering. No words, just the sound of someone speaking softly behind me. I spun around, nothing. The box was right where I'd left it. I chalked it up to my imagination, stress, lack of sleep. But the next night I heard it again, only this time, I recognized something. A voice, my name, a deep, almost intimate whisper, "Eli." I broke out in goosebumps. I walked over, touched the box. It was ice cold, even in the stifling heat. I shook it, listening for anything loose inside, but the sound was muffled, like it was packed with cotton or ash or silence. After that, things got worse. Lights flickered only on the side of the shop where the box sat. A crucifix fell off the wall for no reason. A mirror cracked, but only in the corner reflecting the box. Small things, but enough to unsettle me. I set up a security camera pointed right at it, left it recording overnight. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At exactly 3 a.m., the camera picked up a strange hiss in the audio. Faint, but constant. Then, words. Yiddish, I think. I ran it through a translation app. I couldn't make out everything, but there were phrases like, set me free, cold, memory, guilt. The worst part? After a few seconds, a shadow moved across the edge of the frame. Just a shape, but it dragged wrong, like the floor was pulling it. I called a rabbi, recommended by a customer. I figured he'd laugh, tell me it was nonsense. But the second he saw the box, his face went pale. He touched his forehead, made a gesture with his fingers, and warned me never, under any circumstances, to break that seal. He said a spirit trapped in a Dybbuk box required deep suffering, guilt that outlasted death. The box was a prison, and it only worked as long as the seal stayed intact. I thanked him, but the truth was my curiosity had already won. I needed to see what was inside, needed to understand why it affected people so strongly. So one night, I locked the shop from the inside, drew the curtains, and placed the box on the counter. The wax was already cracked. The latch felt loose. I grabbed a screwdriver, pried it open. The moment the lid gave way, the box opened itself. Not fast, slow, like something inside was pushing gently, testing the world outside. A cold wind rushed out, I swear. Not stale air, real cold. Like someone had opened a window to winter, and with the wind came a terrible feeling. The air grew heavy, thick, like someone was breathing right next to me. I stumbled back, nearly tripped. Inside was exactly what the seller had described. A lock of hair tied with ribbon, 2 old coins, a tarnished silver cup, and at the bottom a scrap of fabric with handwritten Yiddish. I didn't touch anything. I closed it back up, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. But it was too late. Since that night, I've never been alone. I feel it, all the time, like something is sharing my space, especially in the quiet. Sometimes I hear breathing behind my neck. Other times my name whispered again. And it doesn't matter where I am, shop, home, street, the presence follows. I started having strange dreams, scenes I've never lived. Men dragged away by soldiers, muffled screams in languages I don't know, dark rooms with blood on the walls, children hiding in basements. I wake up drenched in sweat, tasting iron, and my voice, it's changed. Deeper, raspy. Friends have noticed, asked if I'm sick. I'm not, just different. I tried resealing the box, melted new wax, tied it shut, recited the words the rabbi taught me. But every night I find it open again. The cup overturned, the fabric out of place. I've hidden it, tried to throw it away. Once I tossed it in the river. The next day it was back on my shelf, wet, but untouched. Now I get it. The spirit inside didn't want freedom. It wanted company, and it found it. It doesn't want to leave, doesn't want to wander, it wants to stay. Here, with me. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure where my mind ends and its begins. Sometimes I say words I don't know. Sometimes I forget the names of things. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the eyes staring back. I haven't sold anything since. The box is still there, on the same counter, and everyone who walks in feels it. The cold, the weight. They leave fast. I stay, because now we're two. And maybe we always have been. Creepy, right? If some curses are born from pain, others come from vanity. The next story is about a piece of jewelry that once belonged to the most ruthless woman in Europe, the cursed necklace of Countess Bathory. I remember the smell of the place, a mix of damp stone, aged wood, and something sweet, almost metallic. Not perfume, not mildew, It was as if the castle itself breathed through the pores of the walls, and every corner still carried the echoes of everything that had ever happened there. And let me tell you, a lot had happened there. I went to Cactus Castle for an exhibit on Elizabeth Bathory, the countess who, according to legend, bathed in the blood of young women to preserve her youth. I'd read plenty about her, and honestly, I always thought the stories were more myth than truth. But something about that place pulled me in, like I needed to see it all with my own eyes. The exhibit was stunning, well organized, full of historical artifacts, relics from the era, manuscripts, clothing, even a reconstruction of the cell where she supposedly spent her final years. But what caught my attention most wasn't part of the main collection. It was isolated in a side room behind thick glass with special preservation warnings. A necklace, gold with red stones the size of cherries. Rubies, I thought. But there was something off about the way they gleamed, like the stones were pulsing, almost alive. The curator told me the necklace was said to have belonged to Bathory, though there was no concrete proof. She also mentioned rumors that it was made using a lost technique involving organic material. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. I laughed it off, of course, but I stood there, staring at that necklace for far too long. And against the warnings, I touched the glass, just out of curiosity. The moment my hand made contact, I felt a faint tingling. I thought it was static, or my imagination. I pulled my hand back, looked around. No one had seen. I continued the tour like nothing had happened, but the castle didn't feel the same. The lights seemed dimmer, the hallways narrower, the air heavier, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, in the hotel, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't exactly insomnia. It was like my body was buzzing with electricity. And the mirror. When I passed by, I jumped. Not because my reflection was distorted, but because I looked different. My eyes were brighter. My skin had a glow I hadn't seen in years. I chalked it up to the lighting. I went to bed late but woke up full of energy. Strange for someone who usually needs 3 cups of coffee just to function. Over the next few days, that vitality only grew. The dark circles under my eyes vanished. The joint pain that had plagued me for years disappeared. Even my hair felt thicker. A friend in Budapest even commented, "You've got a different glow." I laughed it off, but inside I knew something had changed. A strange lightness, like I was starting over. It was on the 4th night that the dreams began. First, quick flashes, a basin full of blood, hands holding a lifeless body, a muffled laugh. I woke up gasping, sweating, even though the room was cold. The next night was worse. I saw young women being stripped and dragged into a stone chamber. A hooded figure, maybe the Countess herself, dipped her hands into blood and smeared it across her face. I screamed in the dream, but no one heard. I woke up crying. I thought about going home, but curiosity got the better of me. I returned to the museum to ask one of the historians a few questions. When I mentioned the necklace, he frowned, uncomfortable. He said that according to ancient manuscripts, those stones weren't rubies. They were crystallized blood. The Countess herself supposedly had the blood of her purest victims solidified to carry their essence with her, he said. I laughed out loud, but when I looked into his eyes, I realized he wasn't joking. I went back to the hotel unsettled. I washed up, tried to distract myself, and that's when I saw it. The necklace, around my neck. Don't ask me how. I didn't take it with me. It was impossible, but there it was, the red stones pulsing faintly like they were breathing. I tried to take it off. Nothing. No clasp, no slipping over my head, no giving way to force. It was as if it had been molded directly onto my skin. I panicked. I used tweezers, scissors, even a knife. Nothing worked, I only hurt myself. And the strangest part was, the more I tried, the warmer the necklace got, like it was annoyed. In the following weeks, other changes began. An insatiable thirst, but not for water. I drank liters and still felt parched. I developed an aversion to bright light. Sunlight made me nauseous. People around me started to distance themselves, saying my presence made them uneasy. One of them, without thinking, said my eyes had a strange reddish glow. I looked in the mirror, And it was true, and there was more. Every time an accident happened near me, a cut finger, someone scraping their knee, I felt the necklace vibrate, like it was feeding. And worse, I felt better. The ache in my shoulder vanished. The dark circles disappeared. It was as if my body recharged from it. That's when I realized, the more blood I saw, the more alive I felt. I started to isolate myself. I tried to go back to Brazil, but at the airport, I had such a violent episode of vomiting and dizziness that I had to cancel my flight. The doctors said it was exhaustion, but I knew it wasn't. I felt hungry and scared of myself, a fear that only grew. I tried to rip the necklace off with tools, thermal cutting, acid. I ended up in the hospital with burns, but the necklace? Untouched, not even scratched, and every attempt only made it feel more fused to my flesh. It wasn't jewelry anymore, it was part of me. In the mirror, I looked younger again, younger than I had in a decade, but my eyes, there was something wrong, a glow that wasn't mine, a heavy, ancient energy, like someone else was looking out from behind my reflection. I decided to document everything. I locked myself in my room and started recording videos, noting symptoms, collecting evidence. I thought that if something happened to me, someone needed to know. The last videos, my voice already sounded different, calmer, firmer, like I'd stopped fighting it. As I spoke, sometimes droplets would trickle from the red stones. I couldn't say if it was sweat, blood, or something else. In the final recording, I smiled. I talked about youth, about the vanity that drives us to do anything. I said youth is a gift that comes at a price, and that some things can't be undone. As I said it, the necklace glowed. Each stone seemed alive. I'm still here, but I'm not the same. And if you're listening to this, I have one request. Never touch the glass, never reach for the necklace. Chilling, isn't it? Not every curse feeds on blood. Some survive on love and longing. This next story is about a Japanese doll kept inside a temple for over a century. Okiku, the doll whose hair never stops growing. But before we go on, if you've made it this far, that means you're really into our stories. So go ahead and leave a like to let YouTube know you love this kind of horror, and to make sure you don't miss the next ones. It wasn't a decision I agonized over. I just wanted to break free from the daily grind, see somewhere new, and feel like I still had time to live a little before getting swallowed up by the workforce for good. I picked Japan on a whim. I'd always been into the culture, the temples, the ancient cemeteries, the legends. So when someone mentioned Hokkaido, I didn't hesitate. I rented a room in Sapporo, but what really drew me in was the chance to visit a temple I'd seen in a documentary years ago, Manenji. The place where they say a doll is kept, a special doll. Her name was Okiku. At the time, I just thought it was curious. Another one of those local folktales, right? Like a creepy urban legend. When I arrived at the temple, the sky was overcast, those heavy gray clouds hanging low like dirty cotton, and a freezing wind slicing across my face. The temple itself was beautiful, dark wood, red paper lanterns swaying at the entrance. There was a strong smell of burnt incense mixed with something older, like damp paper. 2 elderly monks greeted me. They didn't speak much English, but they were kind. One of them led me to the room where the doll was kept. It was small, almost empty. In the center, on a low wooden altar, was a glass case. And inside, she was. The doll wasn't big, maybe 16 inches tall at most. She wore a faded red kimono and her face was pale, expressionless like most old Japanese dolls. But what caught my eye was her hair. Black, straight, and real. You could see loose strands, the texture, the shine. It looked like human hair, because it was human hair. One of the monks explained that the little girl who owned the doll, a child named Okiku, had died from a serious illness, and her family believed her spirit had clung to the doll. Ever since, the hair had been growing on its own. I'll admit that gave me chills. Still, I asked if I could take a photo. The monk nodded but said firmly, "Photos, yes. Touch, no." I laughed, thanked him, and snapped a couple of shots. One of the whole altar and one close-up of the doll. That night, back at the hotel, I pulled up the photos on my phone. Everything seemed normal at first, but then I looked closer. I swear, in the second photo, the doll's hair was different, longer, just a little. A detail I might not have noticed if I hadn't taken the 2 shots almost back to back. I zoomed in, compared them side by side. The more I looked, the surer I was. In the second photo, the hair fell past her shoulders. In the first, it stopped well above. I tried to rationalize it, angle, lighting, reflection, anything. Then came the dream. In the middle of the night, I dreamed I was back at the temple. The room was dark, lit only by that amber glow from a paper lantern, and the doll wasn't on the altar anymore. She was walking across the floor, barefoot, her kimono dragging on the wooden planks, calling to me, "Oni-san." Big brother. Her voice was soft, gentle, but something was off. There was a strange echo, like it was coming from far away, from under the ground. I woke up with my heart pounding, drenched in sweat. I got up to grab some water from the desk and nearly dropped the glass. She was there, sitting, on my desk. The doll. I froze, unsure whether to scream, run, or pretend it wasn't happening. But it was her. Same kimono, same hair, only longer now. The back of it brushed against the desk. I'd left the doll at the temple. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't taken anything with me. But there she was, staring at me, with that empty yet direct gaze, like she was waiting for something. Like she recognized me. The first thing I tried was taking her back. I caught a taxi early and asked to be dropped off at Manenji Temple. The problem? The driver didn't seem to know where it was. I showed him the map and he nodded, but the route made no sense. The scenery repeated like I was stuck in a loop. Same streetlights, same signs, same train station. Finally, the driver, clearly uncomfortable, said he couldn't go any farther. I got out in the middle of nowhere and my GPS signal vanished. I stumbled back to the hotel, dazed, and the doll was there, in the same spot as before. Only now, her eyes were slightly turned to the side, like she'd been watching me leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every so often, I'd hear faint whispers, almost childlike, coming from somewhere in the room. Sometimes I'd feel like someone was darting behind the curtain, but when I looked, nothing. Just the cold room. The silence broken by some distant noise outside and the lingering smell of burnt incense. The next day, the doll's hair was longer, past her waist. I measured it with a ruler, took photos, filmed it, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was my imagination, but it was real. It was growing, every night. And what unnerved me even more was that she kept appearing in different places. One time on the desk, another in the armchair. Once I found her standing by the bed, her head tilted slightly, like she'd been watching me sleep. And I felt it. That sensation of being watched, of not being alone. The kind of thing you can't explain, but you know. This wasn't in my head. It was real. I tried to get rid of her. I put the doll in a box, sealed it with tape, and left it in the hallway closet. By nightfall, she was back on the desk, intact. No box, no tape, staring at me. That's when I decided I had to end this. I had to get her back to the temple no matter what. I took a train to a nearby town, rented a bike, and pedaled to where I remembered the temple being. And there it was, Manenji, like it had never disappeared. The same monks were waiting at the door as if they'd known I'd return. I didn't say a word. I just handed over the doll, trembling. As I placed her back in the case, I heard a whisper, "Oka-san." Mom. At that moment, I felt something strange, a weight in my chest, almost like something sad was saying goodbye, or blaming me. The monks didn't speak. They just nodded, put the doll back on the altar, and said, "She is at peace again." I left the temple feeling lighter, like the air had cleared. But as I adjusted my backpack, I felt a slight tug on my jacket. I looked over my shoulder. No one was there. but caught on the fabric was a single strand of hair. Black, straight, long. Unsettling, huh? Some objects carry memories, others carry the fire of what they've destroyed. The story you're about to hear is about a British painting surrounded by real-life tragedies, the infamous crying boy portrait. The first thing that caught my attention was the boy's eyes. You know that feeling when you sense someone watching you, even when you're alone? Well, that's what happened. The place was packed, one of those antique fairs you wander into just to browse. But somehow you end up dragging home some old junk. Megan and I had gone looking for a wall clock, but we ended up stopping at that booth by pure chance. And there it was, the painting. A boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, with wide, watery eyes. He looked like he was about to cry, but without making a sound. There was something off about his expression, like the tears were more anger than sadness. The seller, a skinny old man with wild white hair, slowly approached. He didn't say, "Good afternoon," or "Can I help you?" He just looked straight at me and said, "That one, they say it brings bad luck, especially if it's near a fire." Megan laughed. I did too. It sounded like the kind of spiel someone uses to drum up mystery and drive up the price, you know? Even with the warning, we bought it. It wasn't expensive, and I'd read about that painting somewhere, maybe on a British urban legends website. The crying boy. They said houses where it hung always ended up burning down, but the painting itself survived, untouched. I thought it was interesting at the time, never imagined it would actually matter in my life. We hung it in the living room, above the fireplace. The frame was heavy, kind of gilded with dark rust stains. And the boy, well, he was still there, frozen, with those damp eyes and an expression that made the room feel colder. Megan said it gave her chills to walk past it at night. I pretended it was nothing, but I'll admit, I started avoiding looking directly at it after a few days. The first strange thing happened in the kitchen. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I was washing dishes when I felt an odd heat coming from the stove. The flame was low, but suddenly, it was like it exploded. The dish towel caught fire in a flash. Luckily, I put it out quickly. No serious damage. But the smell of smoke lingered in the house. And the worst part? When I went into the living room to clear my head, the painting was exactly as before. Untouched. Not a hint of smoke, not a speck of soot. That night something changed. The tears on the boy's face seemed bigger, like they were streaming more than the day before. I thought it was just my imagination, different lighting, angles, whatever. But the next night, I heard a sound that stopped me cold, crying. A child's cry coming from the living room. Megan had already gone to bed and I was alone watching TV. At first I thought it was the show, but the remote was in my hand, the volume low. I walked slowly to the living room, my heart pounding, and when I stepped inside, nothing. Dead silence. Just the painting staring at me. But now I was sure of one thing. His eyes were pointing in a different direction, like they'd moved. The next morning I looked it up. The painting's name popped up in dozens of articles, forums, videos, and in almost all of them, the same story. Mysterious fires, houses destroyed, the painting always intact, and a legend. The boy in the painting was supposed to be an orphan who died in a fire at his orphanage. No one knows for sure what caused the blaze. Some said the boy was mute and always drew flames on paper. Others claimed he had gifts. That fire followed him wherever he went. I showed it to Megan, but she said it was nonsense, that we were just spooking ourselves, that it was all coincidence. And I wanted to believe her, even as that unease grew every day, that feeling of being watched whenever I passed the living room. Those fixed eyes, but somehow alive, like the boy was breathing. On the 5th night, I jolted awake. The smell of smoke filled my nose. I thought it was my imagination, but when I got up and went to the living room, the air was hotter, and the painting, I don't know how, but it was turned toward the fireplace, like someone had taken it off the wall and propped it up on the floor, facing the embers. I approached slowly. There was soot on the frame, but the boy's face was clean. The tears, which always seemed to glisten, were gone. I put the painting back. Megan was already awake when I returned to the bedroom. She said she heard a child calling Mommy in the living room. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I just held her and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I felt like the house was tainted. After that, things got worse. Every time we tried to take the painting off the wall, something fell. A mirror in the hallway shattered on its own. A framed photo from our wedding crashed to the floor, the glass splintering into 1,000 pieces. Megan became convinced the boy was testing us, that he wanted to stay, and to make it worse, she swore she saw him blink. I didn't see it, but I believed her, because I felt it. Like something was moving through the house at night, dampness on the walls, noises in the ceiling, and that crying and more frequent, louder. One Saturday we tried to get rid of the painting for good. We put it in a box, left it on the curb, and went for a drive. When we got back, it was in the living room. Again, the same spot, like it had never left. No box, no dirt, no marks, untouched. That's when I started having nightmares. Always fire, always the boy crying, but silently. And in the depths of the dream, I'd see Megan, engulfed in flames, unable to escape. I'd wake up trembling, drenched in sweat, and the house would smell like smoke even though there was no sign of fire. The last night, well, that's when everything fell apart. I woke up in the middle of the night to the most intense heat I'd ever felt. The bedroom was suffocating, the air dry and heavy. Megan wasn't in bed. I stumbled out and followed the smell of smoke to the living room. And what I saw, I'll never forget. The fire climbed the walls like it was alive. Orange flickers danced near the ceiling, and in the center of the room, standing before the flames, was the painting. But now, the boy wasn't crying. He was smiling. I screamed for Megan, but there was no answer. I tried to run to her, but something pulled me back. The heat knocked me down. Everything went blurry. The smoke filled my eyes, my mouth. I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital the next day. The firefighter said the house was completely destroyed, that only part of the structure remained. And in the center, a painting, intact, not a scratch, with a faint smile on its face. I asked to see it, and it was him, the same one. But now, the tears had returned. Since then, I haven't slept right. The painting vanished from the hospital, no one knows how, and I feel like it's nearby, waiting. Because I was the only one who survived. All of these objects have one thing in common. They all looked harmless, until someone took them home, and maybe, just maybe, they're still out there, waiting for their next owner. If you've made it this far, it means these stories touch something inside you. Leave a like so I know you enjoy this kind of horror, and drop a comment saying, "Cursed objects." That way, I'll know you stayed until the end. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. And stay with me. There's another video right here with more chilling stories waiting for you.